March marks the beginning of the season of the Fool here at Narrative Arcade, and so throughout March and April we'll dive into the Fool Triumphant genre. It's my personal favorite of the 10 storytelling genres laid out by Blake Snyder. In this video I'll explain what the Fool Triumphant is with 3 very different but all well done examples. Kung Fu Panda, The Founder, and Forrest Gump, showcasing the different ways change can manifest when using a Fool archetype. Fair warning, there are big spoilers ahead for all 3 movies. Also, I'm almost done watching Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, so those will get their own big video later. So let's not waste any time and start dissecting my favorite archetype.
What do you mean, you people?
What do you mean, you people?
Huh?
The obvious reason why people like the Fool so much is that they turn into a comedic wellspring. It's just inherently funny watching a fat dude become a kung fu master, or a dumb dude. Or a fat, dumb dude from Beverly Hills. This is how Jackie Chan made his career. He realized there can be only one king, and Bruce Lee was filling that role already. But every king needs a court jester, and the interesting thing about this type of fool is that they deliver the same message as the king, but in a more lighthearted way.
Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash.
Bruce inspired people to think outside the box, to not be tied to one single fighting style or school of thought. And so Jackie took the same principle and ran with it, took it to its logical extreme. He became water. Because the Fool is a wellspring of change. They might not necessarily ever change themselves, but they will act as an agent of change due to their childlike purity. That's why they also represent boundless potential, and it does not matter how stupid it gets.
Who my little hungry one? Hungry one, open up a package of my banana.
Dude, I've got chills.
Bear in mind, this purity does not have to be innocent. This is why I picked 3 very different movies with 3 distinct fools to illustrate this. The first fool managed to incorporate his shadow in a healthy manner. The second fool is consumed by his shadow, and the third, well, simply lacks a shadow to begin with. This versatility is what makes the Fool so interesting for writers. Technically, you can insert the Fool into every story, every genre, and every environment, be it the trenches of World War I, or even a concentration camp. I, for example, wrote 3 features using 3 different genres with a fool at its center. Protocol Destiny is a buddy love story about a cop and his android partner. Think Deus Ex meets Lethal Weapon, where 2 fools must investigate an anti-technology terror group only to find a bigger conspiracy at large and themselves in the process. Major League Drones is set against the backdrop of the institutionalized genre. The institution here being the Dantes, a family of racers with a long and important tradition. But their youngest member can't drive to save his life, so he must learn to carry his family's legacy on the wings of a drone. The third fool encounters a monster in the house when he embarks on a journey to scatter his mother's ash with his estranged father. By the way, I do plan to eventually turn most of my screenplays into graphic novels. They are quite the wild ride. Major League Drones, for example, is inspired by the Divine Comedy. The main Major League track is called the 9 Circles, and so pilots must navigate what is basically animatronic hell. Any potential crash can also paralyze the pilot since all pilots are connected via a neural link with their drone. The higher the synchronization level with the drone, the better you can pilot through the randomness of the track. You feel what the drone feels. Alright, it's Robot Wars on steroids, that's what it is. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I just can't wait to see it come to life in a visual medium. The Fool also acts as a backdoor for inconvenient truths and revelations. One aspect of storytelling that I firmly believe in is that societies cannot tell stories without some sort of genuine hero worship. I don't think it's possible otherwise. Without it, all you're left with is nihilism and deconstruction in your stories. Those do serve a purpose and have a place in storytelling, but they shouldn't be the sole focus of most stories. I'll do a deep dive into this once we get to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm planning a 2-parter, Elixir Manifest for Phase 1 through 3 and Elixir's Undoing for the rest. Because I've never seen a franchise deconstruct itself into oblivion like this before. So as a contrast, what will a society do that is not allowed to hero worship anymore? Well, they will use a fool to deliver the same message a hero would. Case in point, The Germans.
Weg damit, schneller, schnell, schnell, schnell. Und du trinken, trinken, trinken. Schlucken, schlucken, schlucken. Hoch, 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 hoch. Gut, gut.
You see, last time the Germans collectively picked a champion for their cause, let's just say the whole world found out.
In the early part of the previous century, Germany decided to go to war. And who did they go to war with? The world. That had never been tried before.
Just as a quick disclaimer, everything I'm about to explain is just my perception of German society, based on me having lived and worked there and having seen way too much of German television and German media. I am sure there are outliers, and I am 100% sure there will be a couple of people in the comments screaming at me that I'm utterly wrong. Well, welcome to the internet, I guess. One thing I have noticed is the German society is afraid of absolutes, understandably given their history, which is kind of funny because that makes it the only absolute that they have. Everything has to be relative, subjective, or in the eye of the beholder. But you still need absolutes, and that's where the fool comes in. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic here because the majority of German productions that become a box office hit use a fool archetype.
Oh my God.
Was heißt denn so blöd?
By German production, I mean a movie entirely made in Germany. No co-production, written by Germans and made by a German crew. If you can't use a Superman or a Captain America type character to deliver what's right and just, well, you use a fool instead, as demonstrated by the highest grossing German movies. Cowboys and Indians, but with fools. Star Trek, but with fools. The sequel to Dead Poets Society, but with a fool. The original Dead Poets Society, but with a fool. I have not seen number 5. Snow White and the Seven Fools, a cheating fool who has to learn the value of monogamy. An East German fool, a boilerplate rom-com, but with a fool. And finally, the second sequel to Dead Poets Society, but with a fool. Yeah, the Germans are very proud of their school and university system. In reality, it's just like any other soul-sucking public school system.
Deine Schülerin weint.
Chantal.
Ja?
Oh, leise.
If you ever wondered why you had to learn useless crap in school, crap you'll never ever need again once in your life, well, you can thank this guy. Remember when you wanted to make everyone equal, but instead you just made everyone equally inept at handling the real world?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. That was awesome.
Now, you could chalk all this up to budgets. Comedies are cheap to make, right? Well, yeah, but some of these budgets rival those of action films like The Raid and its sequel, and you'll never get an unironic Die Hard movie out of Germany. But a society that can't admit that, for example, masculine virtues are important, well, that society will rely on the fool to deliver the same message. But it must be couched in irony. The last German movie about the hard-boiled cop I saw was literally a live-action version of Chuck Steele. I'm not even kidding. They look and sound the same, they embody the same archetype, and they go through similar transformations. And that's why the fool is so great and versatile. So let's take a look at our first fool and how he will manifest change. The Panda. Of the 3 movies, Kung Fu Panda is the most straightforward one. Po is a panda who helps his goose father with running the restaurant. Yeah, they didn't have that conversation yet, about the pandas and the geese. But instead of making more noodles, Po wants to fight alongside the Furious 5, or 6 if you include him. There are only a few problems standing in his way. He's fat, inept, clumsy, undisciplined, reckless, a bit of a, fool, and the entire valley thinks he's the village idiot, including Master Shifu, the cranky old red panda who is training the Furious 5. However, destinies are about to shift when Master Oogway, a very old and wise, or senile depending on the day, tortoise predicts significant change. According to his prophecy, Shifu's former protege Tai Lung will escape from prison and attack the valley to obtain the Dragon Scroll, a legendary scroll said to grant limitless power to anyone who reads it. In the past, Tai Lung was deemed unworthy and had been denied the scroll. So quite panicked, Shifu sends a subordinate to double the guards and tighten security at the prison, inevitably triggering the very winds of change which will bring about Tai Lung's return.
What's really going to bake your noodle later on is, would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
Shifu also organizes a tournament to identify the Taiga King, a hero worthy of reading the scroll.
And he says, well, obviously you want to watch the guy with the big one. I said, well, you ain't that straight.
Oh, hold on, I think I got my archetypes messed up. It's the Dragon Warrior, right. Shifu organizes a tournament to identify the Dragon Warrior. This beat is also our actual inciting incident or catalyst. The easiest way to identify a catalyst is when it's entirely linked to the protagonist. If Po didn't attempt to sneak into the ceremony in the first place, the story wouldn't be happening. Or rather, his story wouldn't be happening. And so from here on we enter a fairly short debate segment where Shifu tries his best to make Po leave on his own accord. The debate segment is just a variation of the reluctant hero. There is always a bit of a debate before the hero is fully locked into the journey. We break into the second act when Tai Lung breaks free from his prison. And this is where things start to get really interesting. The first thing I always look at when it comes to improving a story is the midpoint. Like flex tape, the midpoint is the one thing holding the two halves of any story together. Your first half builds up to the midpoint and the second half's climax will depend on the midpoint. So how do you handle the midpoint of a fool who never changes? Well, the change will fall on somebody else. At exactly the middle of the movie, Shifu and Oogway have a debate on principles.
Look at this tree, Shifu. I cannot make it blossom when it suits me, nor make it bear fruit before its time.
But there are things we can't control. I can control when the fruit will fall. And I can control where to plant the seed. Hiya! That is no illusion, Master.
Ah, yes. But no matter what you do, that seed will grow to be a peach tree. You may wish for an apple or an orange, but you will get a peach.
But a peach cannot defeat Tai Lung.
Maybe it can, if you are willing to guide it.
Remember what I always say about midpoints. They must raise the stakes and hold the key towards the hero's transformation. This is true for every story, be it Shakespeare or an animated kids movie with talking animals. So the stakes are clearly raised with Oogway's departure. And with Oogway gone, Shifu is on his own and he has no idea how to turn Po into the Dragon Warrior. But Oogway did leave him with the very key that will bring about the hero's transformation. The little debate they had implanted the very seed which will take root within Po. The change manifests in Shifu first, who realizes the flaw in his training methods. Shifu must find ways to sublimate Po's shadow. You see, Po's flaw is his reckless binge eating, which prevents him from developing two things: discipline and confidence. In essence, a matured Po is what would happen if Sammo Hung and Jackie Chan performed the fusion dance. That's why Shifu tailors his training methods to fit Po. What the fool often does is create a positive feedback loop. Po's presence alone is what brings about the very transformation of Po. If this was a script written for teenagers or adults, the change would go much further. The Furious Five would all have an internal flaw that they overcome by working with Po. But that would have been too much drama for a kids movie, and so we are stuck with mostly Shifu, Po and a little bit of Tigress. It's enough for this story, and so we hit the all is lost moment when Shifu hands over the scroll to Po and we discover that it's blank. Now on the surface you could chalk this up to some self-esteem lesson. Po learns that he always had it in him. But that's not what this story's dramatic arc is actually about, especially when we add Tai Lung into the equation. What it's really about is the shadow of a person. One integrates his shadow successfully, the other is consumed by it. The scroll is a literal reflection of that. By the time you have earned the right to read it, your face would have been changed by the journey you went through. So the person who integrated their shadow would immediately realize the meaning of the scroll, and the one who didn't would try to burn the village down for being fed a supposed lie. That's what Oogway saw in Tai Lung, and that's why he was denied the scroll. Remember when kids' entertainment had practical advice filled with valuable and eternal life lessons?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
The movie wraps up everything neatly in a final showdown between the fool and the genius. And as expected, the fool comes out triumphant. Our first fool managed to integrate his shadow, so let's take a look at a fool who does not. The founder. We open up with some company logos. TWC. Never heard of them before.
Why are you running?
I just want to know what TWC stands for. God damn it. Same thing happened with Volkswagen.
Why are you running?
I just want to know why your ad only goes back to the 1950s. Not again. Same thing happened with NASA. It's a simple question. Why did you order so many paper clips for one operation? The founder opens up with Ray Kroc, a traveling milkshake machine salesman with little to no success. If I were to summarize the first 10 minutes of the founder with one word, I'd use mortification. Now, slight or wound work as well, but mortification packs the bigger punch here. It's like a minor psychological slight combined with anger and shame. One instance is not enough to push a person over the edge, but they do add up, and the first 10 minutes are nothing but a collection of slights. This is why I just love the screenplay for this movie. It is pure perfection because everything is set up in the first 10 pages. Everything that will happen is defined by the very first 10 minutes. For screenwriters, it is vital to master the first 10 pages, not just because it is cost-effective to film and studios are more likely to buy your script. It's also important because you're dealing with hyper-reality. That's what all stories are. They exist in a space without the mundane. You see, a person's life actually follows the dramatic arc once you remove all the mundane elements from their life. That's why you are able to make a biopic. And if you ever wondered why the midlife crisis is a thing, well, that's just the midpoint where people try to figure out who they actually are, like the key for the hero's transformation at the story's midpoint. And so Ray's life of constant slights is about to change after one simple order: a drive-in's request for an unusual amount of mixers in San Bernardino. This might seem like the catalyst, but it's not. The actual catalyst is when Ray decides to check out the restaurant, most likely to get away from his life, but it also gets the story going. What he finds are two brothers, Mac and Dick McDonald, two entrepreneurs doing what most successful entrepreneurs do, finding ways to make things run more efficiently and elevate themselves and their environment in the process. Looks like Dick McDonald took his cousin Ron's advice to heart.
I've been developing the Swanson Pyramid of Greatness for years. It's a perfectly calibrated recipe for maximum personal achievement. Categories include capitalism, God's way of determining who is smart and who is poor. Crying, acceptable at funerals and the Grand Canyon.
And so Ray senses the opportunity of a lifetime and asks the obvious question: why not franchise the restaurant?
We already tried. 3 in Southern California, 1 in Sacramento, and 1 in Phoenix. And that's all there'll ever be.
Why?
2 words: quality control. It's almost impossible to enforce standards from afar.
But that little hiccup ain't stopping Ray, and so he pleads with the brothers one more time, which takes us into the second act. The build-up towards the midpoint consists of Ray starting his own branch and trying to convince his rich friends to join in. Now, the midpoint and the key for transformation in this movie are quite fascinating. Technically, no one changes in this movie. Least of all Ray, not the brothers, since Dick was right about Ray from the get-go, not Ray's wife or anyone around Ray. Nobody changes because our agent of change is consumed by his shadow. But the midpoint still acts like a proper midpoint. The stakes are raised when Ray discovers that the people he brought on board are not suited to run a franchise at all. So what about the key for transformation? Well, if the protagonist doesn't change, then the key acts as a catalyst for his flaw. You see, Ray can't get enough, and we'll get to the why in a second. He expanded the franchise at a pace his earnings can't keep up with. But fortunately for him, his new love interest presents a viable solution: powdered milkshakes. These would drop refrigeration costs to a level where all branches become profitable again. There is only one problem. The two brothers are vehemently against it for obvious reasons.
Ray, we have no interest in a milkshake that contains no milk. Why don't we add sawdust to the hamburgers while we're at it?
Remember what I always say on this channel. Every dramatic arc is a tug-of-war battle between the protagonist's facade and the protagonist's flaw. We still burn away the facade to reveal the flaw, but instead of the protagonist going through a dark night of the soul, which will bring about the transformation, they'll instead revel in their flaw. They are still pushed to a breaking point, a catharsis if you will.
I have a far greater understanding of McDonald's than you two yokels.
What? You will do as we say.
No.
You have a contract!
You know, contracts are like hearts. They're made to be broken. I want to take the future. I want to win. And you don't get there by being some aw shucks nice guy sap. There's no place in business for people like that. Business is war. It's dog eat dog, rat eat rat. If my competitor were drowning, I'd walk over and I'd put a hose right in his mouth.
I read through Ray Kroc's biography a little. Did you know that during World War I, he lied about his age and became a Red Cross ambulance driver at the age of 15? The man clearly had a sense of honor and duty. So what happened? The first 10 minutes of this movie happened. You see, the key towards transformation which will surrender him to his shadow is in the midpoint as well. It's when he realizes that no one is like him.
Please tell me you're joking. These are our friends.
No, I know. You know what? You and I, we can make a lot of new friends. It's all right. Make new friends. Friends that they're more suitable for us, you know?
This is why I said everything is set up in the first 10 minutes. This man's biggest flaw is that he couldn't let go. He couldn't let go of all the slights he perceived, and so it corroded his marriage and destroyed the only genuine business partnership he had. And speaking of marriage, I think this is one of the best movies on marriage. Or rather, on how not to get married. I watched this one with my wife, and towards the end we just looked at each other having the exact same thought. Thank God we asked those questions when we dated, before we got married. The question of what life you want to live and how. The question of children and how to raise them. You know, the little things in life that actually matter. Because this movie also shows what happens when two utterly incompatible people get married.
I want a divorce.
It's going to be miserable and lifeless. So tune in for more dating advice here at Narrative Arcade. I got a surefire way of finding the right woman. Forget dating apps or the usual manosphere advice. The Oregon method works best. If your gal can survive the Oregon Trail, she's the right one. Works like a charm and every time, because modern problems require old-fashioned solutions. And so Ray completes his arc by buying out the brothers and their name, giving them little to no options. He cements his legacy with a new wife and a future that will end up serving more than 99 billion people. Well, it's actually much more than that, but that's where they stop counting. So we have looked at a fool who incorporates his shadow, and one that does not. So let's take a look at our last fool, one who never had a shadow to begin with. The Rita... Why did I decide to say the title cards out loud for this one? They supposedly loosened the rules on harsh language and whatnot, but I don't trust YouTube because they still have some provisions against harmful language. And I'm from the Balkans. We got no concept of harmful language. Alright, let's go with the Redacted. We open up with a feather drifting in the wind, a fitting symbol for our fool who's about to be carried away by the winds of change. Forrest Gump, the fool in question, narrates his life. While starting out with a modest and troublesome upbringing, it's not enough to stop Forrest.
Run, Forrest, run!
Forrest actually never does anything really stupid in the movie. Sure, he's slow, but his mom equipped him with the right values and the right heuristic to navigate the real world.
Are you stupid or something? I'm as stupid as stupid does.
And to be honest, he isn't even that much of a fool about certain things.
You don't say much, do you?
Now, I'm not gonna give you a plot breakdown of this one, because God knows every YouTuber under the sun has talked about the plot of this movie. Instead, I'll explain a few directing and script choices that showcase the universality of storytelling. How to even tell a story of change with a hero who does not change. The change must fall on somebody else. In this case, it's two characters in particular who are actually two sides of the same coin. The first character is Jenny. She's already set up in Act 1, but right after we break into the second act, the script introduces the B story with its second character to smooth over the transition.
Morning, sir! Oh, get your hands down. Do not salute me. There are goddamn snipers all around this area who'd love to grease an officer.
As I mentioned before, Lieutenant Dan and Jenny are two sides of the same coin. Jenny is lost searching for a destiny, and Lieutenant Dan is lost because he could not fulfill his destiny. The biggest difference between them is that one is the through line connecting each act and beat, including the midpoint, and the other is a clear-cut B story, which usually comes into focus to either propel the main story or to improve the pacing. Also, this movie has my absolute favorite joke about the military.
What's your sole purpose in this army?
To do whatever you tell me, Drill Sergeant.
God damn it, Gump! You're a goddamn genius. That's the most outstanding answer I've ever heard. You must have a goddamn IQ of 160. You are goddamn gifted, Private Gump.
The midpoint is interesting as well because it does hold the key for transformation even though the hero does not change. The midpoint is when Forrest meets Jenny at the rally. The stakes are raised because this is the only time that Forrest acts unhinged. So he has it in him, it just depends on the situation. But what about the key? Well, it comes in the form of a sentence.
Why are you so good to me?
You're my girl.
I'll always be your girl.
Jenny gets a bad rep, and deservedly so, but I'll show you why her line here matters a lot. It's actually the entire point of this story's dramatic arc. Robert Zemeckis was surprised by the movie's international success. It's obviously a story about America. Forrest is the insert character for America as a nation. But why did international audiences flock to see this movie? Because at its core it's a story about change, and the dramatic arc reflects this back at the audience, in a way that most people will understand. Forrest represents the ideal America, the pure America. Bear in mind, this does not mean a non-judgmental America. Forrest clearly has morals and values, but he applies them equally to everyone. And Jenny represents the actual America, the one that drowns its sorrows in sex, drugs, and rock and roll, never able to fill that void. This is, for example, why Zemeckis chose to shoot in widescreen, even though he was advised against it. The widescreen is not just very useful in capturing people running, and there is a lot of running in this movie. It also enabled Zemeckis to film a close-up and over-the-shoulder shot at the same time. This way he could connect what America is with what America ought to be in one frame. The midpoint plays a crucial role in this. Now, while the choice of scenes and political messaging is clearly very lopsided, the actual point of the dramatic arc is not. What the movie says is, while you may seem lost, unable to find or fulfill your destiny, whatever that may be, the one thing you should always do is build a home. That's what we discover in Forrest's Dark Night of the Soul, when he hits the all is lost after Jenny bails out on him. Again, unable to build a home no matter how much money he has, he decides to run. Just run away from his destiny. It's exactly here that Jenny finally realizes she should do the right thing for once in her life. She was not able to build a home for herself, but she might at least give one to her son. And Forrest finally realizes how pointless all the running was. By the way, this is also how I feel every time I get a wave of new subscribers.
I'm pretty tired. Think I'll go home now.
Lieutenant Dan overcomes his struggles by building a home too, and so we end on a positive note. No matter how hard it gets, make sure to build a home, because it's what's going to give the individual perseverance and resilience. And that's it, everyone. 3 fools across 3 very different journeys. Let me know in the comments what other fool triumphant stories you'd like to see a breakdown of. I should be able to squeeze in a shorter video before the end of April. Next one up is Naruto, probably at this point the most famous fool ever written. It's going to be a long one as I break down both the original series and Naruto Shippuden. Both shows actually have an interesting story structure that's reflected in Naruto's first and last name. Make sure to tune in for that one, and I'll see you on the next page of storytelling.